everyone, and welcome to my tutorial about creating watercolor swatches. So in my last video I shared with you how I create the swatches like this, where I'm going from the most intense shade of a watercolor to the lightest, and I had a couple of questions about how I create these swatches. So that's what I'm going to share with you in this tutorial. And the reason that I do the two types, obviously this one is to see all the variations of shades. This one I'm seeing what will happen with wet paint on dry paper, and then also what will happen with wet paint onto wet paper, which is wet into wet. That is how I typically paint. So within each of these little blocks, I start with dry paper, and then I bring the watercolor into a wet area to see how it reacts with a wet paper. So I also wanted to share with you all the swatches that I've done so far. So this is the Odyssey set by Prima. This is the Complexions palette. It's one of their new ones. This is the Tropical set. This is one of my absolute favorite. Love these colors. And the one that I completed just today, this is the Classics set. So let's get started. To get started, you'll first want to create a grid for yourself depending on how many colors you're doing. I am testing a set of 12. This is the Decadent Pies collection from Prima, which I haven't done yet. And so I just really simply took my ruler and I used the width of my ruler to create each line of boxes, and my ruler is 1.5 inches wide. So this way it's 1.5 inches, this way it's 1 inch each. So I just sectioned off 6 different boxes for each one of these lines. So really any way you want to do it, I wouldn't go much smaller than 1 inch, because you're doing one side with dry paper and one side with wet, so you want to give yourself some room to be able to see the difference. So very simply have my little grid in place, and now we can start to paint. So like I said, what I'm trying to figure out is what happens on dry paper, what happens on wet paper. So the first thing I do is take clean water, and I kind of go in just a diagonal format here. I'm not really trying to be precise, but a diagonal line here, and I'm going to fill this section in with water. Now I don't go all the way to the line. I'm not trying to stay in the lines because sometimes you can't even see water that you've put down, so it's a little tough to do, and you don't want to spend your time trying to stay in the lines anyway. So once I get that wet in, I wet the color that I'm swatching, get that nice and juicy, lots of color and plenty of water. You can see how watery it is on my palette. I start on the dry side, and you can see immediately what happens. So I'm getting what happens on dry paper, and then as I hit that wetness, it starts to move within the water. Some colors are what I call exploding or traveling watercolors. So what they'll do when they hit that water is just start to kind of move and meander, and some won't. So you're really getting to know what each color is going to do, and also it's what it's going to look like when it dries. So it's really just a good way, another way to get to know your colors and what they can do. At this point, I start to be a little more precise, so those edges that I wasn't precise on with the water, now that I've got some color on my brush, I can kind of see what I'm doing. And you can see how this one really is a traveler. It's very beautiful, the way it's granulating and moving within that water. So for this kind of light area, I just take whatever's left on my brush and just kind of swipe it in there until I get it like I want it. Just kind of play with it. This is really all about playing and, once again, seeing your colors and getting to know them. Rinse off really well. Throughout this process, you'll want to change your water because you don't want to get too much of a color into your water and then have it transfer into another color. But once again, so I just start wet diagonal on kind of this bottom half. Just get a little water on there and go into my next color. I leave a little space, obviously, between each box because I typically don't wait for things to dry. And you know, with watercolor, when it's wet, it will marry. So that's why I leave a little space in between each one. Plus, it just looks cool. And once again, this one is pretty much a traveler. It's really moving into that water. Another beautiful color. Okay, so I'm all finished with my swatches and I know my colors better. That's the whole reason for doing things like this, is really to get to know what your paints will do, and it's really interesting to see what each one will do within water and then on dry paper. So a lot of fun, simple exercise, and a good way to get to know your colors. So like I said, this is the Decadent Pies collection from Prima. And as you guys probably know, if you are looking to add to your Prima collection, you can go to myprimaplace.com. You can use the code MelanieAprilArt15% to save 15% on your entire order. And I hope this was helpful for you guys, and happy painting. See you next time.